This session is on Encaustic Tools. We use a board for painting on encaustic, usually a hard board. This is birch plywood taped off with painter's tape around the edge. Some artists let the wax flow down the edge. Generally, I like to cover my edge and finish the edge later. The first thing you really need to do before you start working in encaustic is make sure that you have ventilation, and I have a window fan that I use that exhausts the air over my workstation. Some of the tools that you use in encaustic are carving tools that you might see in a sculpture store. Pretty much anything that a person uses in the clay environment can be used in the wax environment. Of course, you use brushes. The nice thing about encaustics is you don't really need to get expensive brushes. You need natural brushes because the synthetic ones will melt under the heat. But you don't have to always clean out your brushes because as soon as you heat them up, the wax will melt out of the brush. We use a number of different kinds of scrapers. This is a blade from a utility knife, and it's used to scrape back layers when you're doing detail work or multiple layered work. There's other kind of scrapers. You can use just standard putty knives that you can find at the hardware store. In fact, the hardware store itself is a great source for finding all kinds of things that you might use with encaustics. The wax itself can be purchased already pigmented. This is cadmium lemon wax from R&F Encaustics out of New York. Comes in these sticks. This is red wax that came from Encausticos. I like to use a utility knife when I work because it's nice to be able to cut off one portion of the wax at one time. I just warm up the utility knife, and then when I slice, it slices right through the wax. In working with the wax, you also use a medium, and the medium is made up of beeswax and Dahmer resin. I actually mix up my own medium, and these are the things that we use in that process. We use regular beeswax, and this is what the Dahmer resin looks like. The palette for working in encaustic, there are many specialized palettes you can buy, but you can also use a standard pancake griddle that you buy at the store. I also keep a thermometer on the griddle which tells me the temperature of the griddle, and you want to keep that temperature below 200 degrees. I like these little cups that come in muffin tins. They're actually detachable out of the tins. You just cut away the rest of the tin and you get the tins themselves back. You can mix your paint in those tins, or you can mix directly on the palette. Each layer of the wax has to be fused together when doing encaustics, and I do that using a heat gun. This is like a paint stripper's gun that you find at the hardware store. I like this particular model because it has 2 speeds of airflow, and I like the lighter airflow, and it has quite a diverse control over the actual temperature of the heat coming out of the gun. You can also use things like creme brulee torches for small areas when you want to put some focused heat on a particular part of the wax. Some artists like to work with this barrier cream on their hands instead of working with gloves. It provides a barrier on your hands from the wax, and it also makes washing your hands much easier when you're done working. Sometimes I also use something like this, which is a pastry scraper. It's good for cleaning up when you've gotten wax around on the floor and other places. You can just scrape the wax, pop it right off the floor. That encompasses a number of different tools that you can use when doing encaustic painting.